Lesson 9, the spiritual nature of dreams. If dreams are not the same reality as waking life, it seems a poor choice to wait to teach till a person is 20 or in their 33rd month of regular Eckankar discourses to point that out. The results of such confusion could be devastating. Is it a sign of advancement or lack of development that a person would have a hard time figuring out what is and isn't a dream? Most would know that they are distinct forms of consciousness, and brain studies prove it. Different mental states may not affect the station of the soul, though. I believe that we don't get more than we can make the right decisions with. But to say there is a dream censor, making sure we don't have mood swings, is beyond what most can accept. Eckists, or people who practice Eckankar, might even have more mood swings than most people. Eckankar teaches that accepting orthodox or correctly believing religion's ideas on dreams in a past life is why many have problems remembering dreams. So orthodox and orthoprax is a problem in the way for the Eckankar way of saying in what they mean. Orthodox is correctly believing. Orthoprax is correctly doing. Eckankar may be more about experience, but or consciousness manipulation, but that still doesn't mean it's not problematic to go down the route of, it's not about being orthodox or orthoprax. It's like, well, like in my channel, it's about all three. So it should go without saying that many spend years in Eckankar without remembering a single dream. Wasn't it the Golden Heart workshop with Harold Klemp? That was the last time people from the general public could ask Harold Klemp a question live at a seminar, because a man made it known how many years he had been in Eckankar without any recollection of the spiritual experiences the group is supposed to bestow on its members. The Bahanta is the title of the leader of Eckankar as the way show but it is said that those outside Eckankar have a connection with him that they don't know about. Is it a connection projected upon the consciousness, or do you believe that Harold Klemp is the current head of Eckankar as everyone's spiritual master? Harold Klemp teaches that a soul remains in the briny waters of the purgatory of the river of spirit, in sealed containers within a suspended animation, reliving their past until they cry to the Mahanta or exalted personality. The living Ek, God-man in their eyes, master, I cry to God for help. One beyond incarnating in male and female forms is enough for me. Dreams bring greater awareness. That is largely because your brain tends to go over what happened in your waking life and sleep. Do we have to look at wealth, health, love, or success in either a spiritual or material life? Islam teaches that everything worth doing is to be done in the name of God, and the goal is for there to be no secular life for the believer. Eckankar admits that the so-called Eckmasters can't do it all. Peter Zas, known physically as Paul Twitchell, that's sort of a different one to say because Peddar is easy enough. Pedar. Zas, Z-A-S, but K-Q, Zas. Most people can't say that, but that was what Paul Twitchell was known as. Otherwise, is said to have told Harold Klemp that a woman was given a series of past life dreams to explain the business problems in her life through what is called an Ek-Vidya, divine prophecy dream. Her own mind could have gone over her 36 types of income and told her she could get by well with a budget or savings by including it in themes she can't connect events in this life. Do we all have spiritual abilities that we are not using to find another way to make money? Harold Klemp has been paid millions in salary and has had quite the extravagant expense account for his work in Eckankar, which is considerably less on the physical plane than your average elderly or other disabled person collecting welfare. Other disabled people tend to do more work than Harold Klemp is doing back in the 80s, as far as what we know. Who is he to say that people who can't find multiple jobs are not using their spiritual gifts? Life means abundance in the context of dreams being considered potentials. And I mean, a lot of people who are, who are disabled or retired, they have projects with their churches or whatever, helping people. They write books. They're, but Harold Klemp writes books. So but now he doesn't, it sounds like he doesn't work the computers to do that. So other people he's dictating to people. So yeah. Life means abundance in the context of dreams being considered potentials. People can help program information into us, but I would hardly say any Mahanta or exalted personality can give us dreams. Dreams come from ourselves, God, and those being deputized by God are devils. A woman dreamt of Harold Klemp showing up as a pizza deliverer. Her father greeted him while she looked for the money over the next day. As she looked, there was a telepathic communication as her being the only Eckankar practitioner in the family. I, too, am the only person on both sides of my family to have ever accepted any role of Eckankar in my life. They walk through the garden during a break from looking for the money. Finally, she paid in full. Maybe the dream means that Harold Klemp is really low in society and wants more of her money and effort. Pizza is not a healthy food, and that may symbolize that Harold Klemp presents spiritual food that seems pleasing but is not so healthy or even damaging. Now, Harold Klemp has mentioned that he can't have bleached bread, he can't have the antibiotic meat. Well, he doesn't define it as that, but it sounds like that when he talks about chicken and whatnot. And he can't have dairy, but he's brought all those back into his life. So maybe him being by the garage was a symbol of indirect teaching what would be obvious to those who saw him for the type of character he is. Wouldn't her family developing just fine in the face of her struggling to do what she thought her spiritual master wanted indicate her environment is better grounds for her spiritually than what he brings into it? Finding help in dreams comes from treating them as a continuation of one's spiritual life. Everyday life finds some of its guidance in dreams. A mother trying to figure out when to wean her daughter had a dream of losing her daughter in a grocery store and the police telling her that she was gone for good. Pretty messed up thing for police to do, huh? She thought her dream was a warning about kidnapping, but her husband was probably right in saying the time has come to wean the child. She found other messages beyond storylines and dreams too. Dreams seem more real and more full of insight when we understand more about their true nature. Now, when this happens in real life, it's often an emotional interpretation rather than an interpretation of the physical events that went on when people say stuff like that. That, well, the police didn't know what they could do. They said, we'll see what we can do. We'll, maybe they list a few things, but it didn't seem like they had any leads or plans. So, yeah. So there's that to regard when we hear about people's accounts of their events, Fresh insight through dreams came to Jan as she looked for work. Her dream of taking a break in the snack room might better be interpreted as orange soda is not good for you, and focusing on snack food in one's free time can cause weight problems. Either gain or loss, it depends on how it hits you, right? Particularly with some of the chemicals. But more than that, she lack freedom and be unable to face the karma from the spiritual plane there. Purpose of spiritual dreams can be found in the changes in waking existence. Isn't our notice of change what allows acceptance of the process instead of some mahanta or spiritual guide? The Ek dream discourses aid in handling conflicts are towards programming people to think that the Ek, spiritual masters, are really the ones giving them inner guidance. Anu Chila had a dream that her referral of a coworker to a doctor might cause the sort of conflict that it did, but that didn't prevent anything of the problems. She was so angry at times that it would only be dark when she would shut her eyes to contemplate. Captain Stormfield's visit to heaven by Mark Twain shows how people had arrival parties in heaven for the arrogant people who arrived. Now I actually plan to share a little bit of Mark Twain's work. I'm recording this in October, but in December of 2001, I'm not sure how much I will share, but yeah, people who arrived. In Eckankar, this is considered to be an astral plane concept of heaven. The lowest paradise of the afterworld is for the last to crawl out of hell and is better than the earth and 10 like it, according to Islam. Why would those who build up delusions of grandeur even get into the purity of the afterlife without having dealt with their pride? Why would God allow souls to deceive the newcomers with presenting so much attention to them only to drop it off? Harold Klemp is probably right about the almost 8 million people estimated to have a near-death experience actually witnessing where dreams come from. But I don't believe the psychic or Ek worlds are our afterlife. I mean, they're representative of it, but why would the afterlife be limited to the technology and philosophical development of humanity? Oh, what was that series? Wasn't there 3 episodes of that thing on PBS? Because one of the arguments was, well, what about retarded and other mentally challenged people? What about people who didn't have the exposure? It just doesn't seem right for God to limit the afterlife of those people to their worldly abilities or their worldly exposure. Eckankar tells us that the biblical and other prophets are outdated in their vision rather than the concepts others built upon what is said about them being limited to their times. Now, when I argue with spiritual books, usually I'm arguing with a conservative opinion because I'm not saying that any of God's prophets are wrong in anything that they're attributing divine authority to. Near-death-like experiences are a secondary resource that's to the other side when compared with our own dreams and visions. Easing an inner journey can be through opening the spiritual eye. Ted considers Harold Klemp to be his dream master in Wazi. You think Ted would have been a name that they avoided, whether they're coming up with a pseudonym or an actual name, because of what was known about Ted Bundy and such when these were being written, because people would associate in the name and thought Ted Bundy, a lot of people. So they probably would have went away from that, but Stream Master was he. The spectral entity told him in his inner vision that he needed to complete all the details to unfold further. Something about that walk down a town's main street was uncomfortable, and he asked to talk about it later. Quietly, they went on till they saw a Turkish construction supervisor, assumed to be Shamuz-e-Tabriz, the Ekmaster, or this Eckankar way of pronouncing this, Shamuz-e-Tabriz, the Eckankar master, based on worship of Shams-e-Tabrizi, Shams-ul-Din. When the crew working on his house, when the crew was working on his house, there was something in the driveway. The character considered to be Shamus. Oh, there was someone in the driveway. Oh, something. Okay. Okay. My sentence was kind of messed up. I really should have edited this before I typed it out, before I saved it. But there was smoothing the they were smoothing the driveway. The crew working on his house was smoothing the driveway. The character considered to be Shmuz Tabriz found a golden disc while the dust settled. This is probably an allusion to the ECK symbol stretched out like a disc logo that is often in gold colors. He was told to keep it clean and exposed. Focus on the material concerns doesn't have to be impure, nor does his mental objections to Eckankar indicate delusions. A person doesn't have to give up his will to advance spiritually. He should be open about Eck or his spirituality and raise his consciousness in accordance with will. That is Aleister Crowley's definition of magic. What do you surrender to? Arahatas or Eckankar teachers sometimes look at the dreams of others to see that Eck masters and golden wisdom temples, they look at them in different ways. Are actual metaphysical temples and beings taking on all sorts of lowly and mundane forms, or are they transcendent? I don't do spiritual practices intending to try to invoke the so-called Mahanta and celebrity, to invoke sound and light of any sort. Because can't I directly connect to those things myself? Eckankar claims to unite people with the Holy Spirit, just like people talk about being one in Christ, as Christ not being literal, but Christ referring to Jesus as only Christ. But is what is seen and heard in a spiritual exercise really a manifestation of God? Is there any implication that whatever is meant by Eck in this passage has works that are not spiritual? A higher initiate was under attack from invisible beings as she lay in her hospital bed. She prayed to Wazi for help, and a spectral minion of Paul Twitchell, the historical founder of Eckankar, showed up with a bucket of Eck paint, ECK. Why would one entity show up to answer prayers to another unless they were a distraction from the devotion or worship never reached the intended being that is treated as God? Well, if people worship God and other things, witness it. And then there's a response. If people worship other than God, then they know certain vulnerabilities or whatever, or something's been opened, To try to defeat this pushing against her astral body, she was told to paint the walls in her inner world. They painted the entire mock-up of the hospital room with this Eck paint. She was told that Eck was now present, but was it protection or possession? Huge